If you release that file, you're already dead." The voice on the phone was calm, practiced, the kind of calm that came from giving that exact order before. Detective Elena Marlowe pressed the phone harder against her ear, her other hand gripping the folder that could destroy half the city's power structure. "Then I guess I'm already dead," she said. And she meant it. If you love stories about justice betrayal and the unlikely people who fight for truth, subscribe to our channel. Follow this story all the way to the end and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Elena Marlowe had not slept in 31 hours. She knew this, not because she was exhausted though she was, but because the last time she closed her eyes, she had been sitting at her kitchen table, staring at photographs of 3 dead men. 3 men who had been officially ruled accidents. 3 men who had, in the 6 months before their deaths, each attempted to cooperate with federal investigators looking into financial corruption inside Valamont's city government. 3 men who died before they could say a single word on record. Now Elena was sitting in the same chair at the same table, and the photographs had multiplied. 9 dead, 11 missing. And every single thread, every bank transfer, every witness statement, every redacted document she had spent the last 4 months secretly pulling from closed case files led back to the same names. Names that appeared on the front page of the Valamont Tribune every other week. Names that were engraved on the sides of buildings. Names that had given speeches at her own department's annual Justice Awards dinner. Elena pressed both palms flat against the table and forced herself to breathe slowly. She had been a detective for 8 years. She had arrested gang leaders. She had walked into crack houses and burned out buildings in scenes so brutal they appeared in her dreams for months afterward. She was not a woman who frightened easily. But tonight, for the first time in her career, her hands were shaking, because she had just found the last piece. The piece that connected all of it. The piece that meant the people she had trusted to uphold the law were not just failing to stop the corruption, they were running it. The file had come from a source she never expected. A paralegal named Donna Reyes. Donna had worked for 6 years at a mid-level law firm that handled contract disputes and minor civil cases, the kind of firm nobody paid attention to. 3 weeks ago, Donna had walked into Elena's office with a cardboard box wrapped in brown paper and no explanation. She had set it on Elena's desk, looked at her for exactly 3 seconds, and said 7 words. "They killed my brother. Please do something." Then she left. Elena had opened the box. Inside were photocopies, hundreds of them. Financial records, internal memos, and email exchanges that had been routed through the law firm's servers as part of what appeared to be routine business correspondence. But they were not routine. They were coded communications between city officials and the leadership of a criminal enterprise that had been operating in Valamont for over a decade. Not a street gang, not a small-time operation. A sophisticated, organized network that had bribed its way into contracts, redirected public funding, buried criminal investigations, and eliminated anyone who came too close. Elena had spent 3 weeks cross-referencing every document in that box against public records. Every single one checked out. And then 4 days ago, she had found the connection she did not know she was looking for. The name at the center of it all. A name she had seen at that awards dinner sitting in the front row. Deputy Commissioner Harold Stent, the man who had personally approved Elena's promotion to detective 6 years ago, the man who had written her recommendation letter, the man who had shaken her hand at her mother's funeral and told her she was one of the finest officers he had ever known. He was not just involved, he was the architect. Elena called her supervisor, Captain Ray Tolliver, at 6 in the morning. She told him she had something urgent. She told him she needed a secure meeting off-site, no department phones. Tolliver told her to calm down. "Ray," she said carefully, "I'm not calling because I'm panicking. I'm calling because what I've found is going to change everything. I need you to trust me." There was a pause on the line that lasted just slightly too long. "Come to my office at 9, Tolliver said. "We'll talk there." Elena said she would, but something in that pause stayed with her. Something that didn't sit right. She had worked with Tolliver for 6 years. She knew the rhythms of his voice, the way you knew the rhythms of someone you had spent years in close quarters with. He had not sounded surprised. He had sounded careful. Elena did not go to the office at 9. Instead, she called the one person outside the department she still trusted completely, a retired federal investigator named Gordon Chu, who had mentored her early in her career and had spent the last decade running a small legal consulting firm. She drove to his house at 7:30. She laid every document out on his dining room table. Gordon did not speak for almost 20 minutes. He moved from page to page, slowly reading carefully, occasionally picking up a photograph and holding it under the light. When he finally looked up, his expression was not what she expected. He looked afraid. "Elena," he said quietly. "How many people know you have this?" "Just you, and the source who brought it to me." "Where is the source?" "I haven't been able to reach her for 4 days." Gordon set down the paper in his hand. "Listen to me very carefully," he said. "You cannot take this to anyone inside your department. You cannot take it to the DA's office. You cannot take it to the mayor's office or any city official. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "I understand," Elena said. "I just didn't want to believe it." "You need to believe it now." He leaned forward. "The people in these documents, they've been insulated for years. They have eyes inside every system that should be holding them accountable. The moment you try to move through official channels, they'll know. And the moment they know, I disappear," Elena said. "Like the others." Gordon held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "Like the others." Elena drove back to her apartment and spent the rest of the morning making copies. She hid originals in 3 separate locations. One in a safe deposit box under her mother's maiden name. One in a waterproof case buried in the crawlspace beneath Gordon's office floor. One in a fireproof bag tucked inside the hollowed-out frame of a painting in her apartment. A painting of a lighthouse. Her mother had left her the kind of object that looked too sentimental to be anything other than what it appeared. She was methodical about it, careful. She did not rush, even though every instinct she had was screaming at her to run. Because running would confirm she knew something, and she wasn't ready to confirm it yet. She needed one more piece. She needed someone on the inside to speak. The call came at 2:30 in the afternoon. It was a blocked number. Elena almost didn't answer. She answered. "Detective Marlowe." The voice was unfamiliar male low with a flat, controlled cadence. "You've been asking questions about things that aren't your business." "Everything in this city is my business," Elena said. "I'm a detective." "Not for much longer." The line went dead. Elena stood very still for a moment. Then she picked up her bag, tucked the copy of the documents under her jacket, and walked out of her apartment. She did not go back. For the next 6 hours, Elena moved through the city the way she had learned to move through hostile territory. Never in straight lines, never predictably, never in the same place, long enough for someone to get ahead of her. She met Gordon at a diner across the river. "Someone called me," she said. "Blocked number. They know I've been investigating." Gordon's jaw tightened. "How?" "Either my phone is being monitored or someone in the department talked." She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "Ray, my captain. He sounded wrong this morning when I called him. Too controlled. Not surprised enough." "Tolliver is in the documents." "Not directly, but his signature is on 4 approval memos that routed funding to 3 of the shell companies in Donna's files." She paused. "He would have known what he was approving." Gordon was quiet for a moment. "You need to go somewhere safe," he said. "Tonight." "I need to go somewhere with internet access and a printer," Elena corrected. "I need to get this to a journalist. Someone outside the city. Someone who can't be pressured." "That takes time you might not have." "Then I better move fast." She stood up. Gordon grabbed her wrist. "Elena, be careful. These people don't threaten, they act." "I know," she said. She left the diner. She did not know it would be the last conversation she would have for 3 days. They found her 2 hours later. Not because she made a mistake. Because Donna Reyes had already told them everything. Whether Donna was coerced, threatened, or simply terrified beyond the point of resistance, Elena would never know for certain. What she knew was that when the two men who did not look like police officers, but moved like people who had done this before, stepped out of the parked car on Archer Street, they knew her name, they knew her route, and they knew exactly what she was carrying. Elena ran. She was fast. She had always been fast, and she knew Valemont better than most people knew their own living rooms. She cut through the alley behind the hardware store, vaulted a chain-link fence across the rail yard at an angle that put a row of freight cars between her and the men behind her. She ran toward the harbor because it was the only direction with enough cover and enough space to buy her time. She ran because the alternative was being cornered. Somewhere contained, somewhere without witnesses, somewhere that could be made to look like an accident, the way 9 other things had been made to look like accidents in the past 18 months. She made it as far as the old shipping terminal on the south end of the harbor. And then the third man stepped out from between 2 stacked containers, and she stopped. He was holding something. Not a gun. A syringe. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he said. Elena looked at him. She looked at the 2 men who had come up behind her. She assessed her options in approximately 1 second. Then she threw the copy of the documents as hard as she could into the darkness behind her in the direction of the water and put her hands up. Not because she was surrendering, because she needed them to think she was. The moment. The third man stepped forward. She dropped, took his legs out, came up with an elbow that connected hard enough to make him stumble and ran again. But she only made it 6 steps before something hit her from behind with a force that took her off her feet. She hit the ground. And then the needle found her anyway. The last thing Elena Marlowe consciously registered was the cold of the harbor pavement beneath her cheek, the smell of salt water and motor oil, and the sound of one of the men speaking into a phone. "It's done. She's—" A pause. Then a sound she did not understand. In the moment, a sound that was not the men who had chased her. A sound that was something else entirely. Something that made the man on the phone stop talking mid-sentence. And then footsteps. Slow. Measured. Unhurried. The kind of footsteps that did not run toward trouble because they did not need to. She heard a voice say something sharp and quiet in a tone that carried absolute authority. She heard one of her attackers say something she couldn't make out. She heard what happened next without being able to see it, the sound of a brief, decisive confrontation that ended very quickly and was followed by the sound of people leaving in a hurry. Then silence. Then the footsteps again closer now. Then a hand careful and deliberate touching the side of her neck to check her pulse. Then a voice. Low. Unhurried. Not without feeling, but controlled, a voice that was accustomed to controlling everything it encountered, including itself. "Call the doctor. She's alive." A pause. And then quieter, as though the words were not meant for anyone but her, as though the man was aware she could still barely hear him and was saying it anyway. "They tried to erase the truth. I will make sure they regret it." Elena lost consciousness. But somewhere in the darkening edge of it, a single thought surfaced and held itself there before everything went black. She knew that voice. Not from a conversation, from a file, from a photograph pinned to a caseboard in an office she no longer had access to. From 3 years of investigations that had never resulted in an arrest because the evidence always stopped just short. From a name that every officer in Valemont either feared or envied or both. Victor Moretti. And the last coherent thing Elena Marlowe felt before the sedative pulled her fully under was not relief. It was fury. Because she was a detective who had spent 3 years trying to put that man in prison, and he had just saved her life. She came back to consciousness in stages. The first thing she noticed was warmth. The second was the absence of harbor pavement beneath her, something soft under her back. Sheets. A pillow. The particular kind of quiet that belonged to large houses with thick walls. The third thing she noticed was the smell, not antiseptic, not the chemical sharpness of a hospital, but something warmer. Wood. Leather. Coffee from somewhere nearby. The fourth thing she noticed was the man sitting in the chair beside the bed watching her. He was not what she expected. Elena had studied Victor Moretti's file the way she had studied every significant case, exhaustively, systematically, with the kind of attention that turned a subject from a name on a page into a three-dimensional understanding of how they thought, what they wanted, and where they were vulnerable. She had seen photographs. She knew he was in his mid-40s, that he had taken over his father's organization at 26, under circumstances that were never fully explained, that he was considered by every law enforcement agency in 3 counties to be one of the most effective and dangerous organized crime figures in the region. The photographs did not entirely capture the reality of him. He was not performing anything. He was simply sitting with the particular stillness of someone who had learned long ago that patience was a weapon. He was watching her the way she imagined he watched everything completely. "You're going to be angry," he said. It was not a question. "I'm already angry," Elena said. Her voice came out rougher than she intended. Her throat was dry. Her arm ached where the needle had gone in. "There's water on the table beside you." "I didn't ask for water." "No," he agreed. "You didn't." He made no move to stand or to pressure her in any direction. He simply remained in the chair, his hands resting loosely in his lap, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. "You're in my home," he said. "You've been unconscious for approximately 11 hours. The sedative they used on you was strong. The doctor who treated you said it was the kind typically used in operations that aren't intended to leave witnesses." He paused. "You understand what that means?" "It means they weren't planning to let me wake up," Elena said. "Yes." She pushed herself upright against the headboard, ignoring the way the room tilted briefly, and then steadied. "You had me brought here. I had you brought here because the alternative was leaving you to die on a harbor pier. That doesn't make it not a kidnapping." Victor tilted his head very slightly. "You can call it whatever makes you comfortable. It doesn't change what it was." Elena looked at him steadily. "What do you want?" she said. "Because men like you don't do anything without wanting something." "Men like me," he repeated without particular inflection. "You run a criminal organization. You control territory. You have people on your payroll who commit crimes on your behalf. I have read your file more times than I can count, and the only reason you're not in a federal prison right now is that every witness we get close to either recants or disappears." She kept her voice level. "So I'll ask again. What do you want?" Victor was quiet for a moment. Then he reached forward and set something on the bed beside her. A folder. Plain. Unmarked. Elena looked at it. She looked at him. She picked it up and opened it. And then the world she thought she understood tilted on its axis and did not quite come back to level. The folder contained things Elena had not seen before. Financial transfers that connected city contracts to offshore accounts registered to shell companies she recognized from Donna Reyes's documents, but with additional layers she hadn't found. A trail that went further deeper and into territories that reached far beyond Valemont. Recorded phone calls. Transcribed. Dated. Authenticated by a method she recognized as legitimate because she had used the same method herself in 3 federal cases. And photographs. Photographs of meetings that were never supposed to happen between people who were never supposed to be in the same room. Deputy Commissioner Stent. 2 city council members. A federal prosecutor named Aldridge, who Elena knew by reputation, a man who had publicly championed anti-corruption investigations for a decade, and a 4th man, a man she did not immediately recognize. She looked up at Victor. "Who is this?" She tapped the photograph. "His name is Martin Prescott," Victor said. "He works as a senior financial consultant. On paper, he advises municipal governments on infrastructure spending. In practice, he is the person who manages the financial architecture that allows everyone else in that photograph to maintain plausible deniability." "How long have you had this?" "Parts of it for several years, the most recent material for approximately 8 months." Elena stared at him. "You've had evidence of criminal conspiracy by senior city officials for years," she said slowly, "and you never brought it to law enforcement," Victor said. "Detective, think about what you're saying." She stopped, because she understood what he meant. The law enforcement she would have brought it to was the law enforcement that was already in the photographs. "Then why are you showing it to me now?" she said. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Because they came very close to killing you tonight, he said. And that changes the calculation. What calculation? He stood up. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her for a moment, and she watched the set of his shoulders, the posture of someone carrying something very heavy, and doing it so habitually that they had stopped noticing the weight. I am not a good man. Detective Marlowe, he said. I don't tell you that as an apology. I tell you that because I don't want there to be confusion between us about who you're dealing with. I built what I have through means that you would arrest me for if you could prove them. That is true. He turned around. But I am also a man who has watched this city be dismantled from the inside for over a decade by people who convince the public they are its protectors. People who prosecute the crimes they do not control while expanding the crimes they do. People who have used their positions to destroy families, eliminate evidence, and murder anyone who came close to exposing them. His voice did not rise. It never rose. But the weight behind it was unmistakable. What they are doing is not crime. It is something worse than crime. It is betrayal. And I have less tolerance for betrayal than I have for almost anything else. Elena watched him. So you want to use me, she said. You have the evidence, but you need someone credible to present it. Someone who can give it legitimacy that a known organized crime figure cannot. Victor did not confirm or deny it immediately. I need someone who is willing to tell the truth, he said. And tonight, when they came for you, you ran toward the harbor instead of away from the city. You threw the documents toward the water instead of surrendering them. You fought 3 armed men with your hands because it was the only thing you had left. He paused. That tells me you are not going to stop, not for any reason. No, Elena said. I'm not. Then we have something in common. Silence held between them for a long moment. Elena looked down at the folder, at the photographs, at the evidence that could end careers and open prison doors and finally give answers to 9 families who had spent years being told their loved ones had died in accidents. She looked back up at Victor Moretti. She did not trust him. Saving her life did not erase what was in his file. But she was lying in his house alive with evidence she did not have before, and the people who wanted her dead were still out there. Inside the department, she had given 8 years to inside the courthouse. She had testified in dozens of times inside every official channel she had once believed in. I need full access to everything you have, she said. Every document, every recording, every photograph. And I need to be able to go through it myself, not filtered through you, not selected by you. Everything. Victor nodded once. And you don't touch my investigation, she continued. You share resources and information, but every decision about how and when and to whom this goes public is mine. Agreed. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Agreed, he said. And when this is over, Elena said, and her voice was steady, and she meant every word, I am going to make sure that everything that can be charged is charged, including whatever I find that leads back to you. Something crossed his face that she could not quite name. It might have been respect. It might have been something more complicated than that. I know, he said. He said it like a man who had already made his peace with the cost. And Elena Marlowe, who had spent 8 years believing the world was divided cleanly into law and lawlessness, lay in a criminal's bed, with a criminal's evidence in her hands, and felt the ground she had always stood on shift beneath her in a way she knew with absolute certainty was permanent. The truth she had been chasing had led her somewhere she never expected to be, and she had no idea yet how far the fall would take her before she landed. The morning after, Elena agreed to work with Victor Moretti. She did not feel relief. She felt like she had swallowed a handful of broken glass and was waiting to find out which piece would cut her first. She sat at the long table in what Victor's people called the study, a room lined with locked cabinets and a single window that let in pale gray morning light. And she spread every document she had across the surface in front of her. Her files. His files. The things Donna Reyes had risked everything to give her, and the things Victor had collected over years through methods she deliberately did not ask about. Side by side, they told a story that was larger and more brutal than anything Elena had imagined when she first opened that cardboard box 3 weeks ago. A man named Lorenzo, who appeared to be Victor's head of security, brought her coffee without being asked. He set it at the edge of the table, far enough from the documents to be safe, and left without a word. He was large, quiet, and moved with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned that unnecessary noise was a liability. Elena noted all of this and went back to reading. Victor appeared an hour later. He did not ask how she was feeling. He did not apologize again for the circumstances that had brought her here. He simply pulled out the chair across from her, sat down, and looked at the documents she had arranged. "You organize them chronologically," he said. "I organize everything chronologically first," she said without looking up. "Then by network, then by transaction. It gives me 3 different pictures of the same operation." "And what picture do you have so far?" Elena finally looked up. "A picture that's missing something," she said. "Your files go back 4 years, mine go back 14 months. But there's a gap 2 years between the oldest material you have and the beginning of what I was investigating. 2 years where something happened. Something that escalated whatever this started as into what it became." She tapped a page. "What happened 2 years ago, Victor?" He was quiet for a moment. Not the quiet of someone deciding whether to answer. The quiet of someone deciding how. "2 years ago," he said carefully, "a man named Robert Vane attempted to present evidence of financial corruption to the State Attorney General's office. He was a mid-level accountant who worked for one of the shell companies in those files. He had no idea how far up the network went. He only knew that the numbers he was being asked to sign off on didn't make sense, and that when he raised concerns internally, he was told to stay quiet." "What happened to him?" "He died in a car accident on Route 9 outside the city," Victor said. "His wife and daughter were in the vehicle. His wife was killed. His daughter survived." Elena set down the page she was holding. "The accident reports," she said slowly. "Were they falsified?" "The investigation was closed in 9 days," Victor said, "by someone who had the authority to close it quickly and the motive to make sure nothing was looked at too carefully." "Stent?" "Yes." Elena absorbed this. "And Robert Vane's daughter," she said. "Where is she now?" Victor's expression shifted in a way that was almost imperceptible, but that Elena, who had spent years reading faces under pressure, did not miss. "She is safe," he said. There was something in the way he said it, precise and deliberate, the way someone said a thing they had rehearsed, because the unrehearsed version would reveal more than they intended. Elena filed that away. "You knew Robert Vane," she said. It was not a question. Victor looked at her steadily. "We had a mutual acquaintance." "That's not an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." The air between them held that unresolved thing for a moment, and then Elena decided to let it sit. She had learned over 8 years that pushing too hard too fast on a pressure point caused people to close off entirely. Better to circle back when they weren't braced for it. "All right," she said. "Tell me about Martin Prescott, the financial consultant in your photograph," and Victor told her. For the next 2 hours he spoke, and Elena listened and took notes, and the picture that emerged was methodical and patient, and deeply deliberately organized. Prescott was the infrastructure. He was the reason the network had survived as long as it had, because he had designed the financial architecture to be self-insulating, with enough layers between the money and the people spending it, that even an aggressive federal investigation would have struggled to get past the 3rd layer before hitting walls. "How did you get through the walls?" Elena asked. "I didn't go through them," Victor said. "I went around them." "What does that mean?" "It means that people who design financial systems to be impenetrable from the outside generally don't account for the possibility that someone on the inside will decide to cooperate." He paused. 14 months ago, one of Prescott's junior associates made a decision that changed the structure of everything. He had been laundering money through the network for 3 years without fully understanding what the money was funding. When he understood that, among other things, the money had paid to eliminate witnesses and suppress investigations into violent crimes, he came to me. Elena stared at him. "He came to you," she repeated. "He couldn't go to the police," Victor said evenly, "as you are currently in a position to appreciate." Elena absorbed the irony of this without comment. "Where is he now?" "Alive," Victor said. And outside the country. I'm going to need to speak with him. Eventually, that may be possible. He held up a hand before she could push further. Not yet. He is frightened, and he is in a location that took significant effort to make secure. I'm not going to move him or expose him until I have a reason to believe he will be protected. I can protect him, Elena said. You are currently hiding in my house because 3 men tried to murder you with a syringe, Victor said. With respect, your ability to protect anyone including yourself is currently limited. Elena's jaw tightened, but she couldn't argue with it. Fine, she said. Then tell me about Aldridge. Victor's expression changed. It became something harder and more careful, and Elena straightened in her chair, because she recognized that expression. It was the face of someone about to say something they had held on to for a long time. Aldridge, Victor said, is the most dangerous person in those photographs. More dangerous than Stent. Stent is corrupt, Victor said. Stent made choices over time gradually the way most corruption works. One compromise leading to the next. Until you look up one day and you're so far from where you started that you can't find the path back. He is dangerous because of the authority he holds, but he is understandable. He paused. Aldridge is different. Aldridge didn't drift into this. He built it. He recognized early in his career that the most effective way to accumulate power in a city like Valemont was not to align himself with criminal organizations visibly, but to align himself publicly with the people prosecuting them, while privately ensuring that the prosecutions only ever reached the criminals he wanted eliminated. His enemies. His competition. Victor's voice was flat and controlled and absolutely certain. Every high-profile anti-corruption conviction Aldridge has obtained in the last 12 years has served one purpose: to remove people who threaten the network he protects. The silence that followed this was the kind that required a moment to move through. He's been using the justice system as a weapon, Elena said. Yes. To eliminate competition and protect the people paying him. Yes. Elena stood up and walked to the window and stood there with her back to Victor, looking at the pale morning outside, and let herself feel for just a moment the full weight of what she was sitting inside. She had trusted the system. She had given her career to it. Her time. Years of her life spent believing that the structure around her, even when it was slow or flawed, was fundamentally trying to do the right thing. And what she was looking at now was not a few bad actors who had corrupted isolated parts of it. It was a machine, built deliberately, running exactly as its architects intended. She turned back around. All right, she said. Here's what I know. We have documentary evidence, recorded communications, and photographic evidence of conspiracy, financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and complicity in at least 9 deaths. We have a potential witness outside the country. And we have the 2 of us, neither of whom can go through any official channel in this city without the news reaching the people we're trying to expose within hours. She crossed her arms. What I don't have is a clear path to getting this out. The journalists I trust are local. The federal contacts I have are limited, and I have no way of knowing if Aldridge has reach into them. So tell me, in 4 years of collecting this material, did you identify anyone outside this city who this couldn't touch? Victor's expression was thoughtful. There is a journalist, he said, based in Washington. Her name is Catherine Rowe. She covered federal corruption investigations for 11 years. She has no ties to Valemont and no professional relationship with Aldridge or anyone in his network. He paused. She has also been trying to publish a story about municipal corruption in mid-sized American cities for 2 years, and she has been blocked at every turn by legal threats she believes are coordinated. Elena blinked. She's already onto this. Peripherally. She has fragments, individual pieces that she couldn't connect because she didn't have the center of the network. We have the center, Elena said. Yes, Victor said. For the first time since she had woken up in his house, Elena felt something other than anger and controlled fear. She felt the specific electric clarity of a case breaking open. I need to contact her, she said, securely, without going through any phone or email that can be traced to either of us. I can arrange that. How long? 12 hours, maybe less. Elena nodded and looked back at the documents. Then we start building the package, she said. Everything organized and cross-referenced and documented with clear sourcing. If Catherine Rowe is going to publish this, she needs something that no lawyer can successfully challenge. She looked up. And I need everything from you. No filtering, no selective disclosure. If you are in any of these documents, I need to see it. Victor met her gaze. I told you last night I am not a good man, he said. You will find things in those files that relate to my operation. I am aware of that. I am not asking you to ignore them. I know you're not, Elena said. I'm telling you that I won't. He nodded, and they went to work. What followed was 12 of the most intense hours Elena had ever spent in a room with another person. She had worked long investigations before. She had spent weeks in evidence rooms and months building cases. But this was different because the stakes were immediate and the timeline was not abstract, and the man across the table from her was both her best resource and a person she would arrest if circumstances ever allowed it. She kept that knowledge front and center, not to be cruel, but because the moment she let herself forget, it was the moment she became something other than what she was supposed to be. Victor worked with the systematic efficiency of someone who had spent years operating in environments where imprecision was fatal. He knew where everything was. He could retrieve a specific document from a specific date from memory, cross-reference it with a financial record, and explain the connection in 2 sentences. He did not embellish. He did not editorialize. He presented facts and let them speak. It was, Elena admitted privately, the most organized criminal operation she had ever encountered. Around 4 in the afternoon, Lorenzo appeared in the doorway and said something to Victor in Italian that was quiet enough. Elena couldn't catch it, but Victor's response was immediate and sharp, and the kind of tone that communicated urgency without volume. He looked at Elena. There's a problem, he said. What kind? The kind that suggests your former department has been moving faster than we anticipated. He stood up. Gordon Cho was picked up this morning. They're calling it a voluntary interview in connection with a financial irregularity investigation. It is not a financial irregularity investigation. Elena felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. Gordon, she said. He is not under arrest. But they have him in a room, and they are using him to try to locate you. He doesn't know where I am. No, but they don't know that yet. Victor's voice was level and carefully controlled. They will figure it out within the next few hours. When they do, they'll release him. And then they'll watch him to see if you make contact. Elena pressed her fingers against the table. Gordon was 71 years old. He had a heart condition he managed with medication and stubbornness in equal measure. He did not frighten easily, but he was alone in a room with people who were capable of making things very uncomfortable for a man his age. Is there anything you can do? She said. The question cost her something to ask. She felt it leave her hands the moment she said it, a concession she couldn't take back. Victor looked at her carefully. I can have someone contact his attorney, he said. Make sure he has representation present. That will limit how far they can push the interview. Do that, Elena said. Victor made a call. Short, 3 sentences. Then he put the phone down and looked at her with an expression she was beginning to learn, the expression of someone who understood that she was not asking for help out of weakness, but out of necessity, and who respected the distinction. It's being arranged, he said. Elena nodded. They went back to work. An hour later she found it. She almost missed it because it was not in the financial documents, or the photographs, or the recorded communications. It was in a single page from a set of property transfer records Victor had obtained through a source he hadn't explained. A routine transaction. A warehouse on the east side of the city that had changed hands 3 times in 4 years through a chain of companies that appeared unrelated. But Elena recognized one of the company names. She had seen it before, not in any of the documents on the table, but in a case file from 6 years ago. A case she had worked early in her career before she understood what she was looking at. A minor fraud investigation that had been transferred out of her hands within 3 weeks of her starting it, with no explanation given, by an order signed at the deputy commissioner level, by Harold Stent. Her hands went very still. Victor, she said. He looked up. This warehouse. She turned the page to face him. What is it being used for? He looked at it. Something crossed his face that was not quite surprise, more like confirmation. "I believe it is being used as a storage location," he said carefully. "For what?" He met her eyes. "For evidence," he said. "Evidence from closed cases. Cases that were closed before they should have been." Elena stared at him. "Physical evidence," she said. "Actual case evidence. From investigations that were shut down." "Yes." "They kept it," she said, and her voice had gone very quiet because the implication of this was enormous. "They didn't destroy it. They kept it. Which means they were using it," Victor said, "as leverage, over each other, over people who cooperated with them and then became inconvenient." The room felt very still. "That warehouse," Elena said, "is either the most valuable place in this city right now, or it's been emptied in the last 48 hours because they know I'm still alive and looking." "Yes," Victor said. "One or the other. We need to find out which. Going near that building right now would be extremely dangerous." "I know," Elena said. "I didn't say we should go tonight." She looked back at the documents. She was thinking. Building the sequence in her mind, the way she always built cases, not as a list, but as a structure, each piece supporting the next, each connection load-bearing. If the warehouse contained what Victor thought it contained, it was not just evidence of the crimes she already knew about. It was insurance. Which meant the people running the network trusted one another only as far as mutual destruction prevented anyone from acting first. Which meant the network was not as solid as it appeared. Which meant there was a fracture point. "Who is the weakest link in that photograph?" Elena said. Victor didn't hesitate. "Councilman Dennis Farr. He came into the network late. He was recruited because they needed his vote on a zoning approval, and once he participated, they had enough on him to ensure his continued cooperation. But he doesn't have the temperament for it. He drinks. He talks too much. He has a daughter at Valamont University, and a wife who does not know what her husband has been involved in." "He could be turned," Elena said. "He is terrified," Victor said. "He has been terrified for 2 years. He stays because he believes the cost of leaving is higher than the cost of staying." "What if we changed his calculation?" "That would require approaching him in a way that doesn't immediately send him running to Stent or Aldridge." "I know," Elena said. "That's why I can't be the one to do it." The implication settled in the room. Victor looked at her. "You want me to approach him," he said. "You have something I don't," Elena said. "You have information about what they have on him that is specific enough to convince him you're not fishing. And you have a reputation that communicates very clearly that there are worse things to be afraid of than Harold Stent." The silence that followed had a different quality than the silences before it. "You understand what you're asking," Victor said slowly. "You're asking me to use methods you would characterize as coercive. I'm asking you to have a conversation," Elena said precisely. "What you say in that conversation and how you say it is your business. What he gives us as a result is mine." Victor looked at her for a long moment, and in that look was something that Elena was not ready to examine too closely, an understanding between two people who had come from completely opposite places and arrived by completely different roads at the same complicated juncture. "You're adapting," he said, quietly, "not as a judgment." "I'm being realistic," Elena said, and she believed that, and she also knew it was not entirely the whole truth, and she let that sit with her privately while her face stayed steady. "All right," Victor said. The word landed with finality. They went back to the documents, and 2 hours later, when Lorenzo appeared in the doorway a second time and said that secure contact had been established with Catherine Rowe in Washington. Elena sat down in front of the laptop that Victor's people had set up and began typing the message that would either change everything or end whatever chance they had left. She typed carefully, clearly, without dramatics, because the facts were dramatic enough on their own. She explained who she was, what she had, what she needed. She hit send. Then she sat back and waited. And in the silence of waiting, she became aware of something she had been suppressing since the moment she woke up in this house. She was frightened. Not of the evidence or the network or the men who had put a needle in her arm and left her for dead on a harbor pier. She was frightened of this, of sitting in a room with Victor Moretti and not hating him the way she was supposed to. Of finding him clear-eyed and methodical, and in some way she couldn't dismiss principled in his own way. Of understanding that the world she had believed in for 8 years was built on sand, while this man, this criminal, had looked at the same sand and never been naive enough to call it solid ground. She was frightened of how much sense that was starting to make. Her laptop chimed. A reply from Catherine Rowe. Elena leaned forward and read. 3 lines. Short and direct, and exactly what a woman who had been trying to crack this story for 2 years would write the moment someone handed her the center of it. I've been waiting for this. Send everything. I know how to protect a source. When can we talk? Elena exhaled slowly. She typed back a time. Then she closed her eyes for exactly 5 seconds. Let herself feel the fear and the exhaustion and the strange, complicated gratitude of still being alive. And then she opened her eyes and started organizing the evidentiary package that would either bring down half of Valamont's power structure or get both of them killed. Victor appeared in the doorway. She responded, he said. She responded, Elena said. He looked at her, at the expression on her face. You thought she wouldn't, he said. I thought there was a real chance the network had reached her too, Elena admitted. People that careful, they build reach in places you don't expect. They do, Victor agreed. But Catherine Rowe is careful in a different way. She trusts no one with institutional authority, which is precisely why they haven't been able to get to her. Elena looked at him. How do you know so much about her? Because 3 years ago I considered approaching her myself, he said. The admission was quiet and very simple, and it landed with the particular weight of something true. Elena held his gaze. What stopped you? She said. Victor was quiet for a moment. I didn't have enough yet, he said, and I didn't have someone I trusted to carry it. The air in the room was very still. Elena turned back to her laptop. Well, she said, now you do. She began to type. Outside Valamont moved through its ordinary evening traffic and streetlights and the ordinary rhythms of a city that did not know what was being assembled inside a room with thick walls and locked cabinets, and 2 people who should never have been in the same room together. In a department building across the city, Gordon Chu was finally being released from his interview room, his attorney at his elbow, his face carefully arranged to show nothing, in an office on the 14th floor of the City Hall building. Harold Stent was looking at a report that told him Elena Marlowe had not surfaced in 24 hours, and that her body had not been found, and he was sitting very still, with the particular stillness of a man who understood that something had gone wrong and was trying to calculate exactly how wrong. In a bar on the west side of the city, Councilman Dennis Farr was ordering his 3rd drink of the evening and staring at his phone and not answering his wife's calls. And in Washington, D.C., Catherine Rowe was reading Elena's message for the 2nd time, and she was already reaching for her recorder. The machine that had run without interruption for over a decade was about to feel its first real pressure. Not from inside it. From 2 people it had never accounted for, because it had never imagined them together. Catherine Rowe called at 7 the next morning. Elena had slept 3 hours on the couch in Victor's study, surrounded by organized stacks of documents, because she refused to sleep in the bedroom they had offered her again. It felt like accepting too much, settling in too comfortably, and she needed the discomfort to stay sharp. She woke to the laptop chiming and reached for it before she was fully conscious. Catherine's voice was brisk and precise, the voice of someone who had been awake for hours and had already done work. I read everything you sent, Catherine said. All of it, twice. And, Elena said, and I need you to understand something before we go any further. I've been working adjacent to this story for 2 years. I had fragments, municipal contracts, shell company registrations. A pattern of witness recantations in 3 separate federal cases that I couldn't connect. I knew something was there. I couldn't prove the center. A pause. You just gave me the center. I know, Elena said. Which is why I need to know how fast you can move. That depends on verification. Everything you sent, I can authenticate the financial documents independently. The property records I can cross-reference. The photographs are going to require sourcing. The recordings. Another pause longer this time. The recordings are extraordinary, Elena. If they're genuine, and if the authentication holds, they are the single most damning piece of evidence I have ever seen in 12 years of covering this beat. They're genuine. Where did they come from? Elena looked up. Victor was standing in the doorway, awake and dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee, with the calm of someone who had also not slept well and was not going to mention it. A source who cannot be named publicly at this stage, Elena said, but who can be verified through the corroborating documents. That's going to complicate publication. I know. Work on the documents first. Once you have independent verification of the financial trail, the recordings become corroboration rather than the primary evidence. You don't lead with the recordings, you lead with the money. A short silence. You've thought about this, Catherine said. I've been a detective for 8 years. Following money is 90% of what I do. All right, Catherine said. I need 72 hours minimum. I have 2 financial forensics contacts who I trust completely and who have no connection to Valamont. I'm sending the documents to both of them today. In the meantime, I need you to stay reachable through this channel only. Don't contact anyone else. Don't surface publicly. If they find you before I can publish everything you've built collapses. I understand, Elena said. One more thing. Catherine's voice dropped slightly. The person helping you, the one providing the recordings and the financial intelligence. I need to understand who I'm dealing with. Not for publication. For my own protection. Because if I'm walking into something that's going to blow back on me, I need to know the shape of it. Elena was quiet for a moment. She looked at Victor, who was close enough to hear both sides of the conversation and whose expression had gone very careful and very still. The person helping me, Elena said slowly, is someone who has been collecting this material for years because he had his own reasons to want this network exposed. He is not innocent. He has done things that are going to come out when this goes public. He knows that. He's accepted it. Is he law enforcement? No. Another silence. Elena could hear Catherine processing this. He's on the other side, Catherine said finally. Not a question. Yes. And you trust him? Elena looked at Victor. I was watching her with that expression she had been learning to read, the controlled, careful face that kept everything underneath it at a careful distance from the surface. But underneath the control, she could see something that was very human and very uncertain, and it occurred to her in that moment that this man who had spent his entire adult life projecting absolute certainty was sitting with the same fundamental question she was sitting with. Whether this was going to work. Whether they were going to make it out of this. Whether trust between 2 people who had every reason not to was a thing that could actually hold. I trust his interest in the outcome, Elena said carefully. And right now, that's enough. Catherine let out a breath. Fair enough. 72 hours. Stay safe. The call ended. Victor set one of the coffee cups on the table beside the laptop and sat down across from her without a word. Elena picked up the coffee, drank, and let the silence sit for a moment. She's good, he said finally. She's very good, Elena agreed. Which means we have 72 hours to make sure nothing collapses before she can publish. She set the cup down. Tell me about Far. Did you make contact? Last night, Victor said. Elena looked up sharply. You didn't tell me. You were asleep. He met her eyes steadily. And it was preliminary. I needed to confirm something before I brought it to you. What did you need to confirm? Victor was quiet for a moment that told her whatever came next was not going to be simple. I needed to confirm, he said carefully, that Dennis Farr had not already decided to cooperate with Stent against us. The words landed with a cold, specific weight. Elena set down her cup. He's being watched, she said. He is being managed, Victor corrected. There's a difference. Watched implies passive surveillance. What Stent is doing with Farr is active. He has someone inside Farr's household, a personal assistant, who was placed there 18 months ago. Everything Farr says, everywhere Farr goes, who Farr speaks to, it's reported. So when you approached him, I was careful, Victor said. I made contact through an intermediary Far trusts personally. A man named Sal, who runs a restaurant Far, has eaten it every Thursday for 6 years. The conversation appeared to be a chance encounter. Nothing that would read as significant on a surveillance report. What did Far say? Victor picked up his own coffee. He said nothing. He listened. He turned white. And then he said he needed to think. He paused. But before he left, he grabbed my intermediary's arm and said one thing. Elena waited. He said, "Tell whoever sent you that Stent has something planned for this week. Something final. I don't know what. But he's been in closed meetings for 3 days, and he came out of the last one and told his assistant to clear his calendar for the weekend." The room went very quiet. Elena felt the information hit her, the way significant information always hit her. Not as panic, but as a sharp restructuring of priorities, everything rearranging itself around the new weight. "This week," she said. "Yes. He's moving up his timeline. It appears so, which means he knows I'm still alive, and he knows I'm still working, and he is not going to wait for us to surface on our own." Elena stood up. She needed to move. She always needed to move when her mind shifted into this gear. What does something final mean? Does Far have any more specific information? Not yet. I have my intermediary maintaining contact. But Far is frightened, and he's not certain he wants to go further. We need him to go further, Elena said. We need to know what Stent is planning before he executes it. I know. Can you pressure Far more directly? Yes, Victor said. But if I do that, he may break entirely, go straight to Stent and tell him everything. Frightened men are unpredictable. Push too hard, and they run toward the thing they know rather than the thing they don't. So we need to give him something, Elena said. Something that makes cooperating feel safer than staying quiet. She was thinking as she spoke, moving through the room, turning at the wall, and moving back. His daughter. You said she's at Valemont University. Yes. Is she in danger? Does the network have any connection to her? Victor's expression shifted. Just slightly. Not directly. But the network has people inside the university administration. A dean who has been cooperative. If Stent decided to use the daughter as leverage on Far, it would not be difficult. Does Far know that? I don't believe so. Then that's what we give him, Elena said. Not a threat. Information. We tell him specifically what Stent could do to his daughter if Far becomes a liability. Not to frighten him into cooperation, to make him understand that being inside the network doesn't protect him anymore. That Stent is already prepared to turn on him the moment he becomes inconvenient. Victor looked at her. You're very good at this, he said quietly. At what? Finding the thing that makes a person move. Elena stopped moving. She looked at him directly. Is that a compliment or an observation? Both, he said. She held his gaze for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, and then she turned back to the table and picked up her notes. Get word to Sal today, she said. Tell Far we have evidence of what Stent is prepared to do to people he no longer needs. Tell him we're offering him a way out that doesn't require him to destroy himself publicly just to confirm what he knows about the warehouse on the east side. Victor nodded and reached for his phone. Elena sat back down and returned to the evidentiary package she was building for Catherine. But there's something planned for this week. Something final were sitting in her chest like a piece of cold metal, and she could not make them move. She knew what final meant when it came from men like Stent. It meant eliminating the variable. And right now the variable was her. 3 hours later, Lorenzo came to the door of the study with an expression that Elena had learned over the past 36 hours was his version of urgent. Lorenzo did not panic. Lorenzo did not raise his voice. Lorenzo communicated severity through the precise degree of tension in his jaw. Right now, his jaw was extremely tense. There's a situation, he said in the direction of Victor. Victor stood up immediately. Elena was right behind him. What situation? Victor said. Gordon Chu, Lorenzo said. He was released from the department building at noon. He went home. His attorney stayed with him for an hour. The attorney left. And then... Lorenzo stopped. And then what? Elena said. He didn't stay home, Lorenzo said. He got into a car 40 minutes after his attorney left and drove to a location on the south side, a building he has no documented connection to. Our surveillance picked it up. "Show me," Elena said immediately. Lorenzo showed her the address on his phone. Elena looked at it and felt a very cold understanding settle over her. She knew that address. "That's a city-owned building," she said. "Storage and Records Management. Officially, it handles document archiving for municipal departments." She looked up. "Victor, the warehouse you told me about, the one the property records connected to the shell company chain." "A different location," Victor said. "A private warehouse on the east side. But if Stent has been running this network for a decade," Elena said, "he wouldn't keep everything in one place. He would have multiple locations. Redundancy." She was already moving toward the table, pulling up the financial records. "Gordon has been in this city for 40 years. He knows things I don't know. He knows buildings. He knows histories." She stopped. "What if Gordon didn't go there because they sent him?" Victor looked at her. "You think he went there on his own," he said. "I think Gordon Chu spent yesterday afternoon in an interview room with people who had no idea how carefully he was listening," Elena said. "And I think when they let him go, he went home and sat in his house for 40 minutes and thought about something he heard, something they didn't intend to give him." She picked up the address again. "And then he drove to this building." A beat of silence. "He's trying to find evidence on his own," Victor said. "He's trying to help me," Elena said, and the fear in her voice was real, and she didn't try to hide it. "He's 71 years old, and he's walking into a building that may be connected to people who have killed 9 times without consequence because he's trying to help me." She looked at Victor. "I need to get him out of there," she said. Victor was already looking at Lorenzo. "2 cars," he said. "Now." Lorenzo was gone before the word was finished. What happened in the next 40 minutes was the most frightening sequence of events Elena had experienced in a career that had included being shot at twice. Not because of gunfire, not because of violence, because of silence. They reached the building in 14 minutes. Victor's driver knew routes through the city that Elena did not know, the kind of routes learned by people who had spent years moving through a city without being visible, and they moved fast. When they reached the building, the front entrance was unlocked. That was the first wrong thing. A city records facility on a weekday afternoon should not have an unlocked front entrance. Lorenzo's man went in first. Then Lorenzo. Then Victor and Elena, who had made clear in approximately 5 words that she was not waiting outside. The building was quiet in the particular way that buildings are quiet when they have recently stopped being quiet. They found Gordon on the 2nd floor in a corridor lined with shelving units, stacked with document boxes, sitting against the wall, with his phone in his hand, and a cut on his forehead that was bleeding steadily into his eyebrow. Elena was on her knees in front of him before anyone else reached him. "Gordon," she said. "Gordon, look at me." His eyes found hers. They were focused, slightly pained, but focused, and she felt the tightness in her chest release 1 fraction. "I'm all right," he said immediately. "It's superficial. Someone pushed me when they left. I went down and hit the shelf." He looked past her at Victor, and his expression registered something she didn't have time to read. "You must be Moretti." "I must be," Victor said without particular inflection. "Elena speaks well of you," Gordon said. "Relatively speaking." "Gordon," Elena said. "What did you find?" He held up his phone. He had been photographing documents. Elena took the phone and looked at the screen. The photograph showed an internal memo dated 14 months ago. Departmental letterhead. 2 signatures at the bottom, both of which Elena recognized. One was Tolliver, her captain. The other was a name she had not seen before in any of the documents she had reviewed over the past 48 hours. A name that belonged to a federal investigator. A federal investigator who had approximately 14 months ago opened a preliminary inquiry into financial irregularities in Valamont's municipal contracting process. An inquiry that had been closed 6 weeks later with no findings. Closed by the same investigator who had opened it. Elena read the memo twice. Her hands were completely still. "Gordon," she said very quietly. "This memo is authorizing the transfer of evidence from a federal preliminary inquiry into the custody of the Valemont Police Department. Yes, Gordon said. That's not legal. No, Gordon said. It is not. Which means the federal investigator was not closing the inquiry because there was nothing to find. He was closing it because he was transferring what he found to the people he was supposed to be investigating, and burying it here, Gordon said, where it would be administratively invisible inside a city records facility that nobody looks at twice. Elena looked up at Victor. The shift in his expression was subtle but total, the slight narrowing of the eyes, the particular stillness that preceded the rearrangement of a significant calculation. The federal investigator's name, Victor said. Say it. Elena looked at the memo. She said the name. Victor was quiet for 4 seconds. He's Aldridge's man, Victor said. They placed him in the federal office 3 years ago. I knew he existed. I did not know he had access to preliminary inquiry evidence. He paused. This changes the scope. It changes the scope significantly, Elena said, because it means the federal layer of this network is not Aldridge alone. There are placed assets inside the investigative apparatus at the federal level, which means when Catherine publishes the story, isn't just municipal corruption. It's systemic infiltration, Gordon said from the floor, with the satisfied precision of a man who had spent a career recognizing exactly what he was looking at. Gordon, Elena said, I need all the photographs you took. Already sent to an encrypted folder, he said. The link is in the Notes app. Elena stared at him. When? She said. While I was sitting on the floor waiting for you, he said. I may be 71, Elena. I'm not dead. Lorenzo helped Gordon to his feet with surprising gentleness. Victor was already on his phone speaking in rapid, quiet Italian. And Elena could tell from his tone that he was restructuring something, issuing new instructions, rerouting something he had already put in motion. They got Gordon out of the building and into a car, and Lorenzo's man drove him to a private medical contact who could look at the cut on his forehead without creating any record that went through a hospital system. And then Elena sat in the back of Victor's car and looked at the memo on Gordon's phone and felt the shape of the whole thing settle around her with a horrible, comprehensive clarity. She had thought the network had reach. She had not understood how much reach. She had thought taking it down required exposing the people at the top. She had not understood that the people at the top had spent a decade making sure that the systems designed to expose them were already theirs, except for one, Catherine Rowe in Washington, who trusted no institution and no official authority, who operated independently, and with the specific caution of a woman who had been threatened and blocked and legally harassed for 2 years and had kept working anyway. Catherine Rowe, who now had the center of the story. And 72 hours that had just become the most critical window of Elena's life. Victor ended his call. I need to tell you something, he said. He was looking out the window, not at her, and his voice had changed in a way she had not heard before. It was still controlled, but there was something underneath it that was not quite controlled, something that had weight. Tell me, she said. The insider I told you about, he said. The junior associate who left the country, the one I said you would eventually be able to speak with. He paused. His name is Marco Vane. Elena heard the last name and went very still. Robert Vane's son, she said. Yes. The accountant who was killed on Route 9, the one whose wife died, his son. Yes, Victor said. Marco was 19 when his father died. He spent 6 years trying to understand what happened. He was careful, and he was patient, and he was very intelligent, and eventually he was careful and patient and intelligent enough to get himself hired by the company that Martin Prescott used as his primary financial vehicle. He paused. He spent 3 years inside it before he came to me. Elena absorbed this slowly. He didn't come to you because you were a resource, she said. He came to you because I knew his father, Victor said. Robert Vane came to me before he went to the Attorney General's office. He didn't trust official channels. He came to me because he had been told I was someone who dealt in information and who had reasons of my own to want this network damaged. A pause that carried something heavy. I told him what I knew at the time, which was not enough. I told him the official channels were compromised and that going public alone was dangerous. I told him to wait. And he didn't wait, Elena said. No, Victor said. He didn't wait. And 2 weeks later, his car went off Route 9. The silence in the car was very complete. Elena looked at Victor's profile, at the set of his jaw, at the thing he was carrying that had been there since the beginning of this, and that she now understood more fully. You've been doing this because of him, she said. Partly, Victor said. And partly because what this network does is not crime in any category I recognize or respect. They hide behind legitimacy. They wear the law like a mask and use it to destroy people who have no defense against it. His voice was very quiet and very certain. I have done things I am not going to apologize for, but I have never done that. Elena looked at him for a long moment. She thought about 8 years of believing in a system that had been hollowed out from inside before she even joined it. She thought about 9 families who had received condolence calls instead of answers. She thought about Gordon Chu sitting on a floor with blood running into his eyebrow, still sending encrypted files, still fighting. She thought about what it meant to fight for something when all the official ways of fighting had been taken from you. Victor, she said. He looked at her. When this is over, she said, I meant what I said. I will pursue everything that can be charged. I meant it then, and I mean it now. I know, he said. But I also need you to know, she said carefully, that what you've done here gathering this evidence, keeping Marco safe, protecting the information that will be part of the record too, the whole record. He looked at her with an expression she was done trying to categorize. That's not why I did it, he said. I know that too, she said. They were quiet for the rest of the drive, and when they arrived back at the estate, and Elena sat down at her laptop and began incorporating Gordon's photographs into the evidentiary package she was building, something that had grown far beyond what she had imagined when she first opened a cardboard box on her office desk 3 weeks ago. She was building a case that went from a city's streets to its highest offices, to the federal systems that were supposed to hold all of it accountable. She sent the updated package to Catherine at 3 in the afternoon. At 3:47, her laptop chimed with a one-line reply. My editors have seen enough. We're moving to publication review. 48 hours. Elena stared at the screen. 48 hours. And Stent had something planned for this week. Something final. She looked up from the laptop and across the room where Victor was reading through a set of documents with the focused attention of someone who understood that the next 48 hours would either change everything or end everything. He looked up as though he felt her looking. She told him what Catherine had said. I was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Lorenzo. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway. Double everything tonight, Victor said. Every position, every rotation. Nobody moves without check-in. Yes, Lorenzo said and disappeared. Victor looked back at Elena, and she looked at him. And between them in the quiet of that room with thick walls and locked cabinets, something settled that was not comfort exactly, and not peace, but something close enough to both that neither of them felt the need to name it. 48 hours. They had built what they could build. Now they had to survive long enough for it to matter. The first 24 hours of the 48 passed the way. The hour before a storm passes, with a stillness that was not peace but pressure, everything holding its breath. Elena did not sleep. She worked. She cross-referenced, organized, annotated, and built the evidentiary package into something so tight and so thoroughly sourced that any attorney who tried to challenge it would need years and resources the network could no longer afford to spend quietly. She drank too much coffee and ate almost nothing. And when Victor put a plate of food on the table beside her at 11 at night, without comment, she ate it mechanically, without tasting it, and went back to work. Victor did not sleep either. She could hear him moving through the house, brief conversations with Lorenzo calls, conducted in low voices in Italian. The quiet efficiency of a man running a complex operation, while simultaneously dismantling parts of it, because somewhere in the past 72 hours, he had begun doing something she did not fully register until she looked up from her laptop and noticed it. He was pulling people back, quietly, methodically, reducing the visible footprint of his operation in ways that would not read as retreat to anyone watching from the outside, but that she who had spent 3 years studying his organization recognized as deliberate. She filed it away and went back to work. At 2 in the morning, Lorenzo knocked on the study door. "Farr made contact," he said. Elena was on her feet before he finished the sentence. Councilman Dennis Farr had sent a message through Sal, the restaurant owner, 3 sentences handwritten on a piece of paper that Sal had photographed and sent through a channel Lorenzo monitored. The handwriting was unsteady. The sentences were short. "Stent called a private meeting for tomorrow night. My house." He said it was about the Marlowe situation. "I don't know what he's planning, but he told me to make sure my wife and daughter were out of the city." Elena read it twice. The words "make sure my wife and daughter were out of the city" hit her with a specific physical cold that started in her stomach and spread outward. "He's clearing Farr's house," she said. "Yes," Victor said from behind her. She hadn't heard him come in. "He's going to use Farr's house for something he doesn't want witnesses to." She turned around. "Farr's being set up. Stent calls a private meeting, uses Farr's house, and whatever happens there, Farr owns it. Farr's name is on the property. If something goes wrong, it's Farr's problem." She paused. "Or Farr is the problem. He's been too frightened too long. Stent may have decided he's a liability." Victor's expression did not change, but his eyes did a shift in them that told her he had already reached the same conclusion before she finished speaking. "If Stent moves against Farr at that meeting," Victor said, "Farr doesn't survive the weekend. And Farr is the only person in this network who has shown any willingness to cooperate," Elena said. "If we lose him, we lose the one inside voice who can confirm what the documents show." "We can't let him walk into that meeting," Victor said. "No," Elena said. "We can't." They looked at each other. "I need to talk to Farr directly," Elena said. "Not through Sal, not through an intermediary, directly, tonight." "That is extremely dangerous," Victor said. "I know. If Stent's surveillance picks up a direct contact between you and Farr." "I know," Elena said again. "But Farr needs to hear my voice. He needs to understand what tomorrow night actually is. Because right now he's thinking about it as a meeting he's afraid of. He needs to think about it as a trap he has one chance to step out of." She held Victor's gaze. "Can you get me a secure line to him? Something that can't be traced back to either of us?" Victor was quiet for 3 seconds, which she had learned was his version of a long pause. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. He gave her 17. The call to Farr lasted 9 minutes. Elena spoke quietly and directly the way she spoke to cooperative witnesses, without condescension, without pressure, with the specific plainness of someone who is telling you the truth, because the truth is more useful than comfort. Farr cried at one point. Not loudly. A controlled, desperate sound that a man makes when he has been holding something too heavy for too long, and someone has finally named the exact weight of it. "I didn't know how far it went," he said. "When I agreed to the zoning vote, I thought it was just politics. Everyone does it. Everyone trades something for something. I didn't know what I was getting into." "I know," Elena said. "But you're in it now, Dennis. And the question isn't how you got here. The question is what you do next." "If I cooperate." "If you cooperate," Elena said, "you have a real attorney in your corner and a documented record of assistance that matters when charges are filed. If you walk into that meeting tomorrow night, you have whatever Stent has decided you're worth to him. Which right now, based on everything I know, is not very much." Silence on the line. "He's going to kill me," Farr said, very quietly, like a man hearing something he already knew but had been refusing to say out loud. "I don't know exactly what he's planning," Elena said honestly. "But he told you to get your family out of the city. That tells me enough." More silence. "What do you need from me?" Farr said finally. Elena told him. When the call ended, she sat for a moment with her hands in her lap and let herself feel the particular exhaustion of having just asked a frightened man to do one of the hardest things a person can do, step deliberately toward the thing he was most afraid of, because the alternative was worse. Victor was leaning against the wall across from her. He had heard the whole conversation. "He'll do it," he said. "I think so," Elena said. "He's more afraid of Stent than he is of us, but he's just afraid enough of Stent to believe that doing nothing is the most dangerous option left." She stood up. "We need to tell Catherine. The timeline just changed." It's 2:30 in the morning. I know. She emailed Catherine and marked it urgent. The response came back in 11 minutes, which told Elena that Catherine Rowe was also not sleeping, which told her everything she needed to know about how seriously the journalist was taking the next 24 hours. Catherine's response was 3 lines. Editors approved. We can move to publication on 6 hours' notice. Send the word when it's time. Elena stared at those words. 6 hours' notice. She forwarded the email to Victor without comment. He read it, set the laptop down, and looked at her with an expression that was as close to undisguised as she had ever seen from him. It's real, he said. Not disbelief. Something more like a man who had carried a weight for a very long time and was only now allowing himself to feel how heavy it had been. It's real, Elena said. Neither of them said anything else for a moment. And then Lorenzo was in the doorway again, and his jaw was at maximum tension, and the cold that had been sitting in Elena's stomach since she read Farr's note dropped several degrees. We have a problem, Lorenzo said. Victor was already moving. What? Someone accessed the building, Lorenzo said. The East Side warehouse, 20 minutes ago. Our surveillance picked up 2 vehicles. Elena was on her feet. Stent's people. We don't know yet who. It's Stent's people, Elena said with certainty. He's clearing the warehouse. He knows the timeline is moving, and he's destroying the physical evidence before it can be accessed. She turned to Victor. The warehouse has to be on the record before they finish. We need documentation of what's in there, and we needed it yesterday. I have a man 2 blocks from that location, Victor said to Lorenzo. He's already moving, Lorenzo said. But the vehicles that went in there were 4 men. Our man is alone. What can he document from the outside? Elena said. The vehicles, the activity, possibly what's being removed if they're careless about it. Lorenzo looked at Victor. He says there are document boxes. They're loading them into the second vehicle. Get him to photograph everything he can see, Elena said. Make model plate numbers on both vehicles, timestamps, if any of those boxes have visible labels or markings. He's already doing it, Lorenzo said. Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and something changed in his face. Elena had been around him long enough now to read the gradations of his expressions, and what she saw now was not the controlled concern of a man managing a problem. It was something sharper. What? She said. He held the phone so she could see the screen. It was a photograph. Grainy, taken at distance clearly from a phone camera at the limit of its zoom. But clear enough. One of the 4 men loading boxes into the vehicle outside the warehouse was Captain Ray Tolliver. Elena's jaw tightened so hard she felt it in her temples. Tolliver. Her captain. The man who had been careful on the phone. The man whose signature was on 4 approval memos. The man she had called at 6 in the morning because she still in some part of herself she was ashamed of now wanted to believe he was salvageable. He was there himself. Not delegating. There physically in the middle of the night destroying evidence with his own hands. Send everything your man has to me, Elena said, and her voice was flat and completely controlled. Every photograph, every timestamp. Send it to Catherine at the same time. Victor was already typing. Lorenzo's phone buzzed. He looked at it, and his expression went very still in a way that made Elena's attention sharpen immediately. Our man at the warehouse just lost visual, Lorenzo said. What does that mean? Elena said. It means they spotted him, Victor said quietly. The next 40 seconds were the longest of Elena's recent memory. Lorenzo was on his phone speaking rapidly in Italian moving into the corridor. Victor was very still in the way that she had learned preceded decisive action, not paralysis. Then Lorenzo came back. He's out, he said. He moved before they reached him. He's in a car 2 streets over. Elena let out a breath. Did he get the photographs out before they spotted him? Already transmitted, Lorenzo said. Everything he had. Victor looked at Elena. They know someone was watching. Yes, she said. Which means Stent knows the warehouse has been observed. Which means he's going to accelerate everything, Elena said. Whatever he's planning for tomorrow night, he may move it to tonight. She pressed both hands flat against the table. She needed to think, and she needed to think fast. Catherine needs to know right now. The window just got smaller. She grabbed her laptop and typed. Her fingers moved fast. No wasted words. Everything she needed Catherine to understand, in the clearest possible sequence. Catherine's response came back in 4 minutes. I'm calling my editor now. We can go in 3 hours if we have to. The financial verification is complete. The recordings are authenticated. We have enough. Say the word. Elena read it and looked up at Victor. 3 hours, she said. He held her gaze. Say it, he said. She typed the word. Go. The send button made no sound. The email disappeared into the digital space between her laptop and a newsroom in Washington. And in 3 hours, everything that had been built in secret for years by a network of criminals who believed they were untouchable, and by a mafia boss who had been collecting their secrets since the day they killed a man on Route 9, and by a detective who had refused to disappear when they tried to erase her, all of it was going to surface. And then everything happened at once. Lorenzo's phone, Victor's phone, both at the same time. Elena watched Victor's face as he listened, and she had never in the days she had known him seen him look like this, not afraid because she was not sure that was something he experienced in the conventional sense, but something that was its functional equivalent. Something that made his eyes go very precise and very dark. He lowered the phone. They have Gordon, he said. The words went through Elena like cold water. What? She said. The word came out too small for what she meant. They picked him up at his house 20 minutes ago, Victor said. Not a department car, unmarked, 2 men. His attorney is already trying to locate him, but there's no record of him being processed through any official facility. Because they're not taking him to an official facility, Elena said, and the thing she had been keeping at a controlled distance, the real fear hit her fully. Victor, they're not arresting him, they're using him. Yes, Victor said. They know the story is about to break, and they can't stop it through the network anymore, so they're reaching for leverage, Elena said. They're going to use Gordon to make me stop. Yes. She stood very still for 2 seconds. Then she said, how long before the article goes live? 3 hours, Victor said. Maybe less if Catherine moves fast. Can they find Gordon in 3 hours? Victor looked at Lorenzo. Lorenzo made a specific sound that was not quite a word, but communicated his assessment of probability clearly. I have people looking, Lorenzo said, but without knowing which location they're using. Stent has properties, Elena said. Properties that aren't connected to him directly. The same shell company structure in the financial records. It wasn't just for laundering money. Some of those properties are physical locations. She was already moving to the table, pulling up the documents. Help me. Cross-reference the property records against locations in the city that are listed as storage or maintenance facilities. Anything that would have contained space, no public foot traffic accessible without drawing attention. Victor was beside her before she finished speaking. They worked in a silence that was total and focused, the kind of silence that exists only when two people are thinking toward the same point with everything they have. 7 minutes in. Elena stopped. She put her finger on a page. Here, she said. A property management company, third layer out from the shell company chain. They own 4 properties in Valemont. 3 are legitimate commercial spaces that are publicly visible. The 4th, she tapped the page, listed as an equipment maintenance facility for a city contract. But the contract expired 8 months ago. The property wasn't released. It's still in the company's name. Address? Victor said. She read it. He looked at Lorenzo. Lorenzo was already on his phone. Go, Victor said. Careful. We need him out without triggering anything that lets them destroy what's in that article before it posts. Lorenzo left at something close to a run, which Elena had not seen before, and which communicated the severity of the situation more clearly than any words could have. Victor looked at Elena. You're not going, he said. Elena. His voice was not a command. It was something more complicated than a command. If they have Gordon, it is specifically to draw you out. They want you in a location they control before the article posts. If you go, you hand them exactly what they need. She knew he was right. She hated that she knew he was right. "He's 71 years old," she said. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and she let it because there was no point pretending. "He's in that place because he was trying to help me." "I know," Victor said. "If anything happens to him." "Nothing is going to happen to him," Victor said. "Lorenzo is good at this. This is what he does." "You can't promise that." "No," he said. "I can't." The honesty of it was its own kind of steadiness. No false comfort. Just the truth held between them and the understanding that sometimes the truth is the only solid thing you have. Elena sat down. She opened her laptop and looked at the email chain with Catherine and watched the minutes move. 40 minutes later, her phone, the secure line Victor's people had set up, rang once. Lorenzo's voice. Calm, precise, efficient. "We have him. He's shaken. There's some bruising on his wrists where they restrained him. Nothing serious. He's asking about you." Elena closed her eyes for 3 seconds. "Tell him I'm fine," she said. "Tell him—" She stopped. "Tell him I said thank you." "Yes," Lorenzo said. The line went dead. Elena opened her eyes. Victor was watching her. "He's out," she said. Something in Victor's face moved. Not a smile, something quieter and more private than that. A loosening of something that had been very tight. "Good," he said. They sat in the quiet for a moment. And then Elena's laptop chimed. A notification from an email alert she had set up for Catherine Rowe's publication. She looked at the screen. The article was live. Not in 3 hours. Not in the original timeline. Catherine had moved faster than she said she could, the way great journalists always do when the story is undeniable and the moment is now, and the article had gone live at 4:47 in the morning on a national platform, with a readership of 11 million people, and a reputation that could not be legally threatened into silence. The headline was 7 words. Elena read it 3 times. She turned the laptop to face Victor. He read it. The silence that followed was not the silence of exhaustion or fear or the compressed tension of the past 4 days. It was the silence of something that had been building for a very long time, arriving at exactly the place it was always going to arrive. Then Victor's phone began ringing. Then it rang again. Then Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, and for the first time since Elena had been in this house, his jaw was not tense. His expression was something she had not seen from him before and could not precisely name. It was the expression of a man who has been doing very difficult work in the dark for a very long time and has just felt the lights come on. "It's everywhere," Lorenzo said. Every major news platform picked it up in the first 8 minutes. Social media. He paused as though searching for the right framing. "It's moving very fast." Victor put his phone face down on the table. He looked at Elena, and Elena looked at him. And in the space between them was something neither of them had room to examine right now, something that would need to be looked at later carefully in some other time. That was not this one, but that was unmistakably present, as real and undeniable as the article spreading across the country's screens in the gray hour before dawn. "They're going to come now," Elena said. "The ones who can still be arrested through legitimate channels. The federal authorities who aren't compromised, and there are some." Catherine specifically contacted 2 specific field offices before she published. "They have copies of everything." "Yes," Victor said. "Stent will try to run," Elena said. "Aldridge will try to lawyer up before the morning news cycle. Tolliver." She stopped. Thought about Tolliver standing in a warehouse in the middle of the night, destroying evidence with his own hands. Tolliver will try to cut a deal and give up the people above him. "Probably," Victor said. "The federal investigator who buried the preliminary inquiry is going to have nowhere to go," Elena said. Catherine named him specifically. She named all of them specifically. Victor nodded. Elena looked down at her hands on the table. She thought about 9 families. She thought about Robert Vane, who drove to an official office to do the right thing and died on Route 9 2 weeks later. She thought about his son Marco in a safe location outside the country, who had spent 3 years inside the machine that killed his father and had carried that knowledge alone until he trusted someone enough to bring it forward. She thought about Donna Reyes, who had walked into her office with a cardboard box and 7 words and whose current whereabouts were still unknown to her. She thought about Gordon Chu, 71 years old, sitting somewhere with bruised wrists, sending encrypted files from the floor of a city records building, because he believed some things were worth doing regardless of the cost. She thought about all of it and let herself feel the full weight of it, every part of it, not filtered, not controlled. And then she looked up at Victor. "Your name is in the article," she said. "I know," he said. "Not as a source," she said. "As a known organized crime figure who provided material cooperation with the investigation." Catherine was specific. "The article acknowledges what you are." "I told you I understood the terms," he said. "I know you did," Elena said. "I want to make sure you understand what comes next. Because what comes next is federal investigators who are not compromised, looking at everything, including what you've done. The evidence you collected tells them things about your operation they didn't know before." Victor was quiet for a moment. "Elena," he said. "Yes." "Do you remember what you said to me the first night in this room?" She thought about it. "I said I would pursue everything that could be charged." "Yes," he said. "And I said I knew." "And you still did this," she said. "Yes," he said. She held his gaze for a long moment. "Why?" she said. And she meant it, not as a challenge, not as a legal question, but as the genuine question of one person trying to understand another person's fundamental choices. Victor was quiet for a moment. That was not evasion, but consideration. "Because I have done enough things for reasons that served me," he said. "I wanted to do one thing for a reason that didn't." He paused. "And because Robert Vane tried to do the right thing and died for it. And someone needed to make sure that mattered." Elena did not say anything. There was nothing to say that would be equal to what he had just said, and she knew it, and she let the silence carry it instead. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. An unknown number with a Washington area code. She answered it. A man's voice. Official. Careful. The voice of someone who had been awake for the last hour reading an article and making calls. "Detective Marlowe. My name is Special Agent David Kress. I'm with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit out of Washington. I've been in contact with Catherine Rowe in the last 40 minutes. A pause. "I need to speak with you. In person. Today. Can you tell me where you are?" Elena looked at Victor. He looked back at her. She had spent the past 5 days inside his house working beside him, trusting him in ways she had not trusted anyone in a very long time. And now the moment had arrived when the world outside that house came back in with all its structures and authorities and requirements. The world she was part of and always would be part of the world she had given 8 years to and would continue to give herself to because that was who she was, and nothing that had happened had changed it. She held Victor's gaze for one more moment. "I can tell you where I am," she said into the phone. "But I need to make something clear before I do. There is a man here who made this possible. His name is Victor Moretti. And when you come ready to listen to everything, not just the parts that are convenient." Silence on the line. "Understood," Agent Kress said. Elena told him the address. She ended the call. She set the phone down on the table. And she and Victor sat in the very early morning in the quiet, before everything changed, with the weight of what was coming, settling around them, like the first light beginning to touch the edges of the sky outside. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said had already been said, or would be said, in the hours ahead, in rooms with other people, and official purposes and consequences that were real and unavoidable. This moment was not that. This moment was just two people sitting in the particular stillness that exists on the other side of something enormous, before the world rushes back in. And whatever it was, this thing between them that had no clean name and fit in no category, either of them had been prepared for. It was real. As real as anything else that had happened in the past 5 days. And significantly harder to know what to do with. Special Agent David Kress arrived at Victor's estate at 7:12 in the morning with 2 other agents and a legal attaché named Sandra Park, who carried a briefcase and said very little, and watched everything with the careful attention of someone who was cataloging details for a purpose she had not yet revealed. Elena met them at the door herself. She had changed into clean clothes, borrowed from a closet she had not asked about, and she had washed her face, and she had done nothing else to present herself differently than she was because she was done performing composure she didn't entirely feel. She was exhausted in a way that lived in her bones. She was also more clear-headed than she had been in weeks. The specific clarity that comes when something you have been fighting toward finally arrives, and the fighting is replaced by something that requires a different kind of strength. Cress was younger than his voice had suggested. Mid-30s, careful eyes, the kind of contained energy that belonged to someone who had been awake all night and was running on the particular fuel of a case breaking open in real time. He looked at Elena. He looked past her into the house. "Mr. Moretti is here," he said. "He's here," Elena said. "And as I told you on the phone, he cooperates fully, or I don't walk you through a single piece of this in person." The documents speak for themselves, but context matters. Victor Moretti is part of the context. Cress exchanged a brief look with his attaché. "Understood," he said. They went inside. Victor was in the study, standing rather than sitting, which Elena noted he had chosen to receive them on his feet, which was a choice about positioning that she recognized as deliberate. He was not performing aggression. He was simply refusing to perform submission, and there was a difference that Cress, to his credit, appeared to read correctly because he extended his hand first. Victor shook it. The four of them sat at the table where Elena and Victor had spent the last 4 days building everything that was now spreading across every news platform in the country. And Elena began from the beginning. She talked for 2 hours. She was precise. She was organized. She presented everything in the same sequence she had built it chronologically. Then by network, then by transaction. And she answered every question. Cress and Park asked, without deflecting, including the questions about her own conduct, including the questions about the days she had spent inside a known organized crime figure's private estate, including the questions about methods and sources that she knew were going to complicate things for her professionally. She answered them all honestly, because she had spent 8 years believing in honesty as the structural foundation of what she did, and 5 days in a house with Victor Moretti had not changed that. If anything, it had made her more committed to it, not less, because she had watched what happened when the people who were supposed to uphold honesty decided it was optional. When they reached the portion of the briefing that involved Victor directly, he spoke for himself. Clearly. Without an attorney present, which Cress noted and which Victor acknowledged. "I'm aware of my right to counsel," Victor said. "I've chosen to speak directly because what I have to say is more useful than what any attorney would advise me to say, and because we are not in a circumstance where my primary interest is self-protection." Cress studied him. "You understand that everything you say here—" "I understand fully," Victor said. "Ask your questions." Cress asked his questions. Victor answered them the same way Elena had answered hers, precisely honestly, without deflection, including the portions of his answers that described his own criminal operation with a matter-of-fact directness that made the legal attaché's pen move faster. At one point, Cress stopped and looked at both of them across the table and said with the slightly bewildered tone of a man who had seen a great deal and was still occasionally surprised by the world, "I want to be clear about what I'm looking at. A detective and an organized crime figure who have been working together in a private residence for 5 days to build an evidentiary package against a municipal corruption network." "Yes," Elena said, "and you are both fully aware of the legal implications for each of you." "Yes," Victor said. Cress sat back. He looked at his attaché. He looked back at them. "All right," he said. And there was something in those 2 words that was not quite admiration and not quite disbelief, but occupied some complicated territory between the two. They broke at 9:30 for coffee. Cress took a call in the corridor. Park stayed at the table and continued reviewing documents with the focused efficiency of someone who did not consider coffee breaks to be breaks. Elena stepped into the adjacent room. Victor followed. They stood for a moment in the quiet, just the two of them, with the sound of Cress's voice, a low murmur through the wall, and the weight of the morning pressing down on everything. "How are you?" Victor said. The question was simple and direct, in a way that most people were not direct, and it landed with more impact than it should have. Tired, Elena said honestly. And she stopped, searched for the right word. Processing. Yes, he said, as though he understood exactly what processing meant in this specific context. They're going to move on stent today, Elena said. Kress said the field office already has a warrant application in front of a judge. Aldridge is likely already lawyered up. His office issued a statement at 6 this morning calling the article defamatory. She paused. His attorney is going to have an extremely difficult time with defamatory, given that every fact in that article has been independently verified. Tolliver, Victor said. Kress says he's unreachable. His wife says he left the house before 4 this morning and hasn't returned her calls. Elena looked at the wall. He's running, which is going to make things worse for him, not better. And the federal investigator, the one who buried the preliminary inquiry. Administrative leave as of 6 this morning, Elena said. Pending investigation, which is the polite version of done. Victor nodded slowly. And Martin Prescott, he said. Elena turned to look at him. Why? Because Prescott is the infrastructure, Victor said. The others are replaceable. Prescott is the one who built the system that allowed all of them to maintain distance from one another. Without him, the financial architecture collapses. But Prescott also knows where every piece of it is. He is the one person in that network who, if he cooperates, gives investigators everything they couldn't find on their own. Kress mentioned him, Elena said. They're treating him as the primary financial witness target. They believe he's been preparing for this contingency for some time. He's someone who plans exits. He is, Victor said. But his exit depends on having somewhere to go where the documentation I've provided doesn't follow him. He paused. It will follow him. Elena looked at him. You sent something to Kress's office before they arrived, she said. It was not a question. This morning, yes, Victor said. Additional financial records, specifically related to 3 offshore accounts under Prescott's control that are not in any of the documents you built your package from. I kept them separate. Why? Because I wasn't certain until this morning whether I trusted the process enough to release them. And now? He met her eyes. Now I do. The quietness of that. The simple direct statement of trust in a process. He had spent his entire adult life operating outside of was one of the most significant things Elena had heard in 5 days of significant things. She did not say that. She held it instead, the way you hold something fragile. Victor, she said. Yes. What happens to you now, realistically? He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, considering. Realistically, he said, there will be charges. The cooperation I've provided will factor into how those charges are structured and what any eventual resolution looks like, but it will not eliminate them. I've known that from the beginning. He paused. What I am less certain of is what happens to the organization, to the people who work for me. Lorenzo, Elena said. Among others, Victor said. Lorenzo has been loyal for 11 years. He has also done things on my behalf that are going to be visible when investigators start looking. I have to find a way to protect the people who were carrying out orders, which is complicated by the fact that the people who were carrying out orders for a criminal enterprise. Kress will want cooperation from your people too, Elena said. If they can help build the case against the municipal network. I know, Victor said. I've already spoken to Lorenzo. He understands. Elena looked at him for a moment. You talked to him last night, she said. Before Kress arrived, before I even called Catherine back. Yes, Victor said. You told him what was coming? Yes. And he stayed. Victor's expression moved in that particular way. She had come to recognize the understated version of something that ran very deep. He stayed, Victor said simply. Kress appeared in the doorway. We need to continue. There's been a development. They went back to the table. The development was this: Dennis Farr had walked into the FBI's Valemont field office at 8:50 in the morning with an attorney Elena did not recognize and a written statement that ran to 14 pages. Kress slid a summary across the table. Elena read the first page and felt the specific sensation of a structure settling into its final form. Every load-bearing piece confirming what it was supposed to confirm. Farr's statement corroborated the financial records. It corroborated the recorded communications. It provided first-hand testimony of 3 meetings she had only had documentary evidence of, including a meeting at which Stent had explicitly discussed the management of the 9 deaths she had spent weeks connecting. It was not just corroboration. It was the inside voice. The human confirmation that turned a documentary case into something irrefutable. Farr went in on his own, Elena said. Apparently he called his attorney at 5 this morning, Kress said. His attorney called our office at 7. He's been in the building for almost 2 hours. Elena looked at the summary. She thought about the 9 minutes she had spent on the phone with a frightened man at 2 in the morning, telling him the truth because the truth was more useful than comfort. She thought about what it cost a person to walk into a federal building with 14 pages of confession and testimony and put it all on a table. She thought about his daughter at Valemont University, who would have a father who was compromised and afraid, but who would also, because of what he had done this morning, have a father who was still alive. He did the right thing, she said quietly. He did, Kress agreed. It won't eliminate consequences for him, but it will significantly shape them. Park looked up from her documents. Detective Marlowe, there's a question I need to ask you directly. Ask it, Elena said. In the days you spent working with Mr. Moretti, did you at any point participate in, authorize, or have knowledge of any illegal action taken by Mr. Moretti or his associates in connection with this investigation? The room was very quiet. Elena looked at Park steadily. I requested that Mr. Moretti's people provide security extraction for Gordon Chu from a location I believed he was being held illegally, she said. I was aware that the people carrying out that extraction were operating outside legal authority. I made that request because I believed Gordon's life was at immediate risk, and there was no legitimate channel available to me that was not compromised by the same network I was investigating. Park wrote something. I'm telling you this voluntarily, Elena continued, because I'm not going to start lying to a federal investigation to protect myself. You asked for honesty, and you're getting it, including the parts that are inconvenient for me. Park looked up. She held Elena's gaze for a moment with an expression that was entirely professional, and also, Elena thought, not entirely without respect. Noted, Park said. Victor had been watching this exchange without speaking. Now he said quietly and directly, whatever Detective Marlowe's conduct is ultimately assessed to be, it should be assessed in the complete context of the situation she was operating in. She was a law enforcement officer who had been targeted for elimination by a network that controlled the department she belonged to. The options available to her were not the options that would normally be available. That context will be considered, Kress said. Make sure it is, Victor said. Not a threat, a statement of expectation. The voice of someone who had spent his life understanding exactly how much weight his words needed to carry to be effective. The briefing continued for another 90 minutes. By the time it concluded, Elena's phone had received 12 calls from numbers she didn't recognize, 4 texts from colleagues at the department she had been effectively suspended from, 3 expressing shock, 1 expressing support, and 1 voicemail from her sister in Phoenix, who had seen the news and wanted to know if Elena was safe. Elena listened to her sister's voicemail twice. Her sister's voice was shaky with worry and ended with, "Call me when you can. I don't care what time it is, just call me." Elena pressed the phone against her forehead for a moment. Then she put it in her pocket and went back into the room. Kress was preparing to leave. His team was gathering documents copies only. Elena had made sure the originals stayed in the places she had placed them, accessible to multiple parties through multiple paths that the network could not close simultaneously. Detective Marlowe, Kress said, I need you to come into our field office this afternoon for a formal recorded deposition. You understand that your status? I understand my status, Elena said. I'll be there. Kress nodded. He turned to Victor. Mr. Moretti, you'll be hearing from our office regarding... I'll have my attorney present for that conversation, Victor said. You have what you need for today. Kress extended his hand again. Victor shook it again. And then the federal agents left, and the door closed, and the house was very quiet. In a way it had not been quiet since Elena arrived. She stood in the hallway. Lorenzo appeared from somewhere. She was still not entirely certain where Lorenzo materialized from when he appeared. It seemed to be simply a function of him, and he looked at her with an expression she had never seen from him before. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple and entirely unexpected, and Elena did not know what to do with them for a moment. "For what?" she said. "For making him go through with it," Lorenzo said. "He's been carrying this for years. The right thing to do was always obvious. It was the cost that stopped him." A pause. "You made the cost feel worth it." Elena looked at him. "I didn't do that," she said. "He did that himself." Lorenzo shook his head very slightly, the way someone shakes their head when they disagree with someone they respect. Then he turned and walked away down the corridor. Elena found Victor in the kitchen. How was making coffee? Actual coffee, not directing someone to make it standing at the counter going through the motions of a mundane domestic task, with the focused attention of someone who needed something simple to do with his hands. She sat at the counter and watched him. "Lorenzo thanked me," she said. Victor didn't look up. "Lorenzo is sentimental." "He said I made the cost worth it," Elena said. "He meant for you." Victor was quiet for a moment. "How was wrong?" he said. "The cost was always going to be what it was. I knew the cost before you arrived. What changed?" He paused. He poured the coffee. He set a cup in front of her and then held his own without drinking it. What changed was understanding that the cost was going to be paid either way. The question was what it bought. Elena wrapped her hands around the cup. "Robert Vane," she said. "Yes," he said. "Among other things." They were quiet for a moment. "I need to ask you something," Elena said. "Ask?" "Marco, Robert's son. He's still outside the country. He's going to need to come back. He's going to need to testify." She paused. "Can you make sure he's protected until that's arranged through proper channels?" Victor looked at her over his coffee. "You're asking me to coordinate with a federal investigation. I'm asking you to keep a young man safe until the system that failed his father can be trusted enough to do it," Elena said. "Those are different things." A very small pause. "Yes," Victor said. "I can make sure of that." "Thank you," Elena said. They drank their coffee. Outside the city of Valamont was waking up to a morning unlike any it had experienced in a decade. The article had been shared more than 200,000 times before 8 o'clock. 3 television networks had sent crews to the City Hall building. 2 city council members had issued statements, one calling for immediate independent investigation, one calling the reporting irresponsible, a position that was already being made untenable by the volume of verified documentation Catherine had attached to the piece. Harold Stent was arrested at his home at 10:47 in the morning. Elena was in the car on her way to the FBI field office when her phone buzzed with the news alert. She read it and set the phone down in her lap and looked out the window at the city moving past. 8 years. 9 families. The particular irreversible cost of a system that had been turned against the people it was supposed to protect. She thought about what Stent had looked like at that awards dinner. Comfortable, confident, shaking hands and nodding at the right moments, wearing the entire apparatus of legitimate authority, like a suit that had been tailored specifically to fit him. She felt no satisfaction at his arrest. She had never felt satisfaction at arrests. She had always felt the quieter thing underneath the satisfaction. The thing that asked what the arrest could not restore, what it could not undo, who it came too late for. But she felt something. The specific solid weight of a thing that was true being confirmed as true. That was not nothing. That was in fact everything she had gone into this work to achieve. The deposition at the FBI field office took 4 hours. Elena answered every question with the same precision and honesty she had brought to the morning briefing. And when it was over, and Park slid a document across the table that outlined her cooperation and its implications for her professional status. Elena read it carefully before signing it. Her formal status was suspended pending internal review. This was expected. This was given the circumstances the most she could have hoped for in the short term. What came after the review would depend on what the review found. She signed the document. She walked out of the federal building into the afternoon light and called her sister back. Her sister cried. Elena did not. She held the phone and listened to her sister cry and said, "I know, and I'm all right. And I'll come to Phoenix when this is done, I promise," and meant every word. When she ended the call, Gordon was waiting for her on the steps. He looked like himself, older than yesterday, which was a function of bruised wrists and a night he did not deserve to have had, but fundamentally himself, with the same dry steadiness that had made her trust him when she was 26, and new to this, and needed someone to trust. She hugged him. She had not planned to. She was not by habit a person who hugged people in public or made physical expressions of feeling in professional contexts. She did it anyway. Gordon hugged her back with the arms of a man who had spent a very difficult night and was genuinely glad to be standing in afternoon light. "You could have gotten yourself killed," she said into his shoulder. "I could have," he agreed. "I chose not to." She pulled back and looked at him. "The photographs you sent from the records facility," she said. "The memo with the federal investigator's name. That was the piece that broke the federal layer open. Kress said it himself this morning." Gordon's expression did something she rarely saw it do. Something small and satisfied and deeply human. "Good," he said. She shook her head. "Don't ever do something like that again." "I won't need to," he said simply. "It's done." She stood beside him on the steps for a moment. "What happens now?" he said. "Now the process does what the process is supposed to do," Elena said. "Slowly and imperfectly, and with significant legal battles ahead, but it moves. Farr is cooperating. Prescott is going to be found. Victor gave Kress financial records this morning that will locate his offshore positions. Stent is in custody." She paused. "Aldridge is going to fight. He has resources, and he has lawyers, and he is not going to go quietly." "He never does," Gordon said. "That kind of man never does." "No," Elena agreed. "But he's going to go. Eventually. The weight of what's documented is not something any attorney can make disappear." Gordon nodded. "And Moretti," he said. Elena was quiet for a moment. "He's going to face what he's going to face," she said. "He knows it. He accepted it before any of this started." She paused. "His cooperation will matter. What he gave us, the recordings, the financial intelligence, the inside access that Catherine was able to use to construct a story, no one could legally challenge. None of this happens without him. That's part of the record now." "Does he know that?" Gordon said. "Yes," Elena said. "He's not doing it for recognition. What's he doing it for?" She thought about a man on Route 9. She thought about a son who spent 3 years inside the machine that killed his father. She thought about Victor standing at a kitchen counter making coffee with his own hands because he needed something simple to do, while the world restructured itself around the decision he had made. "He's doing it because it was the right thing to do," she said. "And because someone he cared about tried to do the right thing and paid for it, and he wasn't willing to let that be the end of the story." Gordon was quiet for a moment. "That's a complicated kind of man," he said. "Yes," Elena said. "He is." 3 weeks later, the internal review of Elena's conduct was completed. The findings were careful and specific. They acknowledged the exceptional circumstances of her situation, the documented compromise of her chain of command, the demonstrated threat to her life through official channels, the absence of any legitimate avenue of recourse available to her. They acknowledged her full transparency with federal investigators. They acknowledged that the outcome of her choices, however irregular the path, had resulted in the exposure of a criminal network that had operated with impunity for over a decade and had caused irreparable harm to dozens of individuals and families. She was reinstated, not without conditions, not without a formal notation in her file that would follow her, not without a conversation with the interim deputy commissioner, Stent's replacement, a woman named Patricia Gale, who had been brought in specifically because she had no prior connection to Valamont's political structure that was frank and difficult and honest on both sides. But reinstated. She went back to her desk on a Tuesday morning in early November. The office felt the same and completely different, the way places feel when the people who defined them are no longer there. Tolliver had been arrested 17 days earlier, found at a motel outside the city where he had been living on cash. His arrest had been quiet, which was exactly what Tolliver had always preferred. Quiet, invisible, deniable. He did not look comfortable in handcuffs. Elena had seen the photograph and felt nothing in particular, which was its own kind of answer about where she had arrived. On her desk was a small stack of new case files. She sat down. She opened the first one. And 3 months after that, on a cold January afternoon, she walked into a coffee shop 2 blocks from the federal courthouse, where several of the proceedings were still ongoing, and Victor Moretti was sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee and the particular stillness of someone who is accustomed to waiting without showing that they are waiting. His attorney had negotiated a resolution that acknowledged his cooperation with significant weight. He had not escaped consequences, he had not tried to. Several charges had been filed, and several more had been formally declined in recognition of the evidence he had provided and the risk he had taken to provide it. The negotiation had been long and complicated, and the outcome was something no party on either side was entirely satisfied with, which was Elena had come to understand the definition of an honest resolution. His organization had been significantly restructured. Several people had gone through their own legal processes. Lorenzo had cooperated with federal investigators and received a resolution that kept him out of prison, which Elena had been quietly glad of and had not said anything about publicly. Victor had divested from several business interests and was in the process of making others legitimate in ways that would take years and were not guaranteed to succeed but were real and sustained. I was not the same man he had been when she first woke up in his house. She was not the same person either. She sat down across from him. She picked up the coffee he had ordered for her. "How is Gordon?" he said. "Annoying," she said. "He's trying to come back out of retirement. He has 3 federal attorneys calling him for consulting work." "He should take them," Victor said. "I told him that," Elena said. "He said he needs to think about it, which means he's already decided and is enjoying making them wait." Victor's expression did that thing she remembered, the understated version of a smile, the one that lived just at the edge of restraint. She had missed it. She had not fully admitted to herself how much she had missed it until right now, sitting in a coffee shop in January, watching it happen in real time. "Marco is back," Victor said. "He testified last week. It went well." "I know," Elena said. "I was in this building. I didn't go into the room. It wasn't my proceeding, but I was in the building." Victor looked at her. "Why?" "Because someone should be," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. "He wants to meet you," Victor said. "Marco. He asked me if I could arrange it." Elena looked at her coffee. "I'd like that," she said. They sat for a while in the coffee shop, in the ordinary noise of an ordinary afternoon. 2 people who had come from completely opposite places and arrived at the same table by a road that made no conventional sense and had changed both of them permanently. "Are you all right?" Victor said. Elena thought about it honestly, the way she had learned to think about things in the past months, without the managed composure she had used for years to keep the weight of her work at a professional distance. "I'm better than I was," she said. "I'm not the same as I was before any of this. I don't think I will be." She looked at him. "Is that all right?" "Yes," he said, simply and without qualification. She looked at him for a moment. "Victor," she said. "Yes. What you did." She stopped. Started again. "I know you've heard it from Kress, and from Park, and from the resolution process, and from Catherine's follow-up reporting, but I want to say it to you directly without any official context." She held his gaze. "What you did mattered. 9 families have answers now. Cases that were closed are being reopened. A system that had been used as a weapon is being repaired slowly but genuinely. That is real, and you are a significant reason it is real." Victor was quiet for a moment. "So are you?" he said. "I know," Elena said. "I'm not being modest. I'm just telling you that your part of it will not be forgotten. Not by me." He looked at her with an expression she had spent months learning and would spend more months still, and said nothing. Because some things are true enough that they don't need to be answered, only received. Outside the coffee shop window, Valemont moved through its January afternoon, ordinary and imperfect and slowly genuinely different than it had been. The way cities change when the things hidden inside them are brought to light, and the people who were harmed by the darkness are finally given what they were always owed. It was not a complete redemption. It was not a clean ending. It was something more honest than either of those things. A beginning disguised as a resolution for two people who had walked through the worst version of a city and come out the other side, changed in ways that made them separately and together something closer to who they were supposed to be. The truth had cost both of them enormously, and they had paid it. Not because it was easy or safe, or because anyone had guaranteed them an outcome they could live with, but because some things are simply worth the cost of being true, and the only people who ever change the world are the ones stubborn enough and brave enough to pay it.